Mystery Secret Searchers, Episode 27, Sword Abandoned. War is done, a time to build. The curse and sword left behind in the river, a call and a secret no man should bear, found on land and must be buried at sea. Here's the map of Glengarry that we're interested in. We know that Sir John Johnson was beginning to build tunnels from Williamstown in the south up through Alexandria, all the way up heading towards Hawkesbury on the Ottawa River. So there was a north-south connection between Williamstown and Hawkesbury, or the St. Lawrence River and the Ottawa River. East to west, to complete the cross shape, we have in the east Lower Canada, or what is now Quebec, and heading out to western Glengarry in the Highlands near Maxville and St. Elmo. This cross-shaped pattern of the tunnels represents the cross that maybe we're hearing about. We thought it was the number 10, or the cross had something to do with the churches. Well, actually, it does have something to do with the churches, because when you check the map more closely, you see there are churches in all the locations that we mentioned. There's a church in Williamstown, church St. Raphael, Alexandria, a church over in eastern Glengarry, and a church over in western Glengarry. However, the point of this episode is that the sword was in the hands of the Americans, but then it was dropped into the St. Lawrence River. In this area here, this is an area between Cornwall and Prescott. This is an area now known as the Lost Villages. John Maclean came here when this was all land. All that water out there was land. John Maclean came here to search for the sword, and he found it. He found it, and he knew he had to hide it. The curse he knew was going to follow him, but he had to hide that sword. The Lost Villages is located just to the west of Cornwall. It consists of 9 communities in the former townships of Cornwall and Osnabrook, which is now South Stormont. These were permanently submerged by the creation of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1958. So before 1958, this land that you see extended further out. And where you see the water right now, that's where there used to be communities, now known as the Lost Villages. The Lost Villages are now a museum. Here we see some of the buildings that were saved before the flooding of the St. Lawrence River. The flooding was a result of the Moses Saunders Power Dam construction, which began in 1954. In the weeks and months leading up to the inundation, families and businesses in the affected communities were moved to the new planned communities of Long Sault and Ingleside. In all, approximately 6,500 people were displaced by the project, 530 buildings were moved, and countless other homes, schools, and businesses were demolished or flooded. A section of the highway in this area was also flooded, and as a result, they had to build the new highway along the existing Canadian National Railway tracks. At 8 a.m. on July 1st, 1958, a large cofferdam was demolished in the St. Lawrence River, allowing the flooding to begin. 4 days later, all of the former town sites were fully submerged. Well, John McLeod knows that the war is done. It's a time to build. Communities were springing up all along the St. Lawrence River and further to the north in Glengarry. But John McLeod knew of the sword. He knew it couldn't just sit out there in those lands. He had to search for it. At that time, the St. Lawrence Seaway was not there. There was no flooding. He was able to find the sword, and he had to continue to keep it a secret. But it was becoming a burden for him, a burden that he writes in his journal that no man should bear. He's found the sword on the land in the area now known as the Lost Villages, and it must be buried at sea. He wants to bury it at sea. John McLeod had lots of ideas about burying things at sea. This is where we discovered the strong box containing the journal. He buried that at sea, or we believe he buried it at sea. He wanted to hide the journal. He felt that the journal contains too much information about the curse of the sword. He wanted the sword hidden, maybe buried at sea, and he wanted no one to know of the sword. He didn't want anyone to know of his journal now. He felt the journal contained too many clues, too many secrets. But there were still some people in the Glengarry area that knew of the story and could keep bits and pieces of the story alive. John McLeod was not aware of this. He thought by disposing of the sword and his journal in the St. Lawrence River that he had secretly and successfully concealed the curse of the sword, but he hadn't. The curse followed him all through Glengarry and all he came into contact with. This was a period of time in history after the Americans were repulsed from invading into Upper Canada and Lower Canada that Glengarry was prospering. John Johnson was granting land to settlers. They were farming the fields. They were growing livestock and producing plants, and generally the area was doing really well. Cornwall was a city in this region that was popping up. It was going to be a major area, a major source of trade and commerce in the Glengarry area. All of the villages and communities along the St. Lawrence River were contributing to the success and to the wealth and to the prosperity of the area. But the curse of the sword remained. And so as John McLeod continues to work with Sir John Johnson on land distribution in Glengarry, John McLeod also carries with him another secret. The secret of the cursed sword of the Clan McLeod. He has to decide what to do with it. In upcoming episodes, we see the struggles that he went through to try to hide the sword and block the curse from affecting the people he knew so well in Glengarry. And as the sun sets on the Lost Villages, I will take you to another area of interest in Upper Canada. These are grave markers that were saved from the flooded area in the Lost Village. They've been turned into a type of museum. Lest we forget those who lived in this area. Well, stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.